I will say a much better component of using using Restream over StreamYard is that it does the countdown for you now. It makes things much easier. What's up, guys? We're back. Episode 3 of season 2 of Lost. Orientation is what this episode is called, and it is an orientation for a couple different people, both the characters in the show and for us. We get some answers, and in classic Lost fashion, we get way more questions after the fact than answers. But we do get some resolution to the things that we've been introduced to in these first 2 episodes. Would you agree or disagree, Luke?
I would mostly agree because in this episode, Lost did something that after what I've come to know as Lost, something that I never expected out of this show, and we'll get to that in
Yes.
just a bit.
Yes, indeed, we will. The new component has officially been added. They have officially taken their position as the new enterers of the numbers and such. All of that and more in today's episode of Talkin' Lost. All right, Luke, season 2, episode 3, orientation. Now, like I said, we checked back in with them entering into the hatch. We checked in with the raft survivors, and now we're following both of them on the island. There's not too much that happens with the survivors of the raft picking up immediately after last episode. Michael, Jin, and Sawyer get kidnapped by the people who they assume to be the others, although they quickly realize that they are not the others. Sawyer gets whacked in the face with a stick by a very, very tall guy played by Adewale Akinye Agbaye, the guy with the longest and most impronounceable name in all of Hollywood. But been in many, many different things. But like I said, this is where we officially meet him as Mr. Echo. They get dragged, thrown in a hole. They're trying to figure out how to get out. Next thing you know, Michelle Rodriguez gets tossed in the hole with them. It's our first major introduction to Ana Lucia on the island after we were first introduced to her in the season 1 finale. We know for this, even though it's not explicitly told to us, they basically put 2 and 2 together. We as the audience put 2 and 2 together that like, okay, these are not the others. These are clearly other survivors from the plane. As for people who remember, when the plane crashed, the rear section of the plane broke off and landed on another part of the island. And so even though it ends with her, taking the gun from Sawyer and being pulled out of the cage, she was thrown in there in order to try and kind of feel them out. A classic interrogation technique, if you will.
That was definitely done in the 100, like at least 2 or 3 times. But
Yes,
I'm not going to hold them to that. That's just a common trope of
yes,
interrogation and whatnot.
exactly. It's a very well-known interrogation technique that may or may not have something to do with Ana Lucia's backstory, which we'll get into. Like I said, we still don't have any names. They still haven't explicitly told us. But like I said, for people who have been paying attention to the show up to this point, that can put 2 and 2 together, be like, okay, these are clearly not the others. These are people who have been on another section of the island for these last 48 days that have had no contact with our current batch of survivors, and as a result, may have had to have gone a little bit more feral. So, yeah, that's kind of where we leave off. What's called, but like I said, that one's more so just kind of like a brief continuation. We don't check in as much. We spend way more time with the hatch, but I did just want to get that one storyline over with. Now we're in the hatch, and yeah, things are going down. So we finally pick up after the last 2 episodes. Like I said, the last episode kind of just a filler in of some of the events. Now this is like the main continuation where basically Desmond and Jack are at a standstill. Kate comes in to try and help, hits Desmond with the gun. Desmond accidentally fires. The bullet hits the computer that they have to enter the code into. So now the race is on to try and fix the computer as Locke and Jack continue their debate as far as what's real and what isn't. Why do we care about entering the numbers into the computer? Yada, yada, yada. So just first and foremost, as this episode being not only kind of another action-paced episode, but also another continuation of the central struggle of this season that was set up in that premiere, the man of science versus the man of faith. Man, the Jack and Locke beef really is getting to next levels here over seemingly whether they should push a button or not.
Yeah, there is this like great sense of paranoia from Jack, I feel, and it culminates in his final confrontation with Desmond, where he breaks down. His science brain wants to believe that no, this is completely fake, but then Desmond says things that make him think, oh, maybe this isn't fake. Like his feelings hurt when he walks by the concrete wall with the electromagnetic waves and whatnot, or like there's a sense of, okay, nothing's gonna happen when it hits 0, but like what if something does? So
Exactly.
that inner struggle of like, oh, okay, I guess I will push the button, as he does at the end of the episode, and Locke being on the other side of it, like he completely believes it. So it's this back and forth for Jack.
Yes, it's a classic Schrodinger's cat situation where it's like, oh, do we push the button or not? Like, what is the reasoning for why we're pushing the button? Does anybody actually know what's going to happen if we don't push the button? It's kind of bringing in all of these different factors, again, debate, all of this different philosophical debate and all that. Obviously, again, the central conflict of the episode is fix the computer, because the timer, of course, is going to keep going down. So Locke sends Kate to bring Saeed and Hurley down into the bunker. This is a very funny shot where Hurley sees the food pantry and the camera just pans back, and I'm like, ah, yes, classic mid-2000s trope. But essentially what you have, that's exactly what you have here, where it's the Schrodinger's cat situation. That we also finally get some much needed backstory for with the island, with the origins of, with the organization that kind of set up this station, as Jack and Locke watch in the orientation video that Desmond tells them about.
Yeah, that was what I was talking about. Like as vague and cryptic as Lost has been, I never expected them to bring a full on exposition. Watch this film reel with
Yes.
the characters. Like, okay, this is the most exposition we've ever had in.
But even with that, I'm glad this.
Then it's like,
even then it's still cryptic. They still managed to keep it very cryptic that way. With that's our first introduction of Francois Chow's character. Francois Chow is a very well-known character actor. He's been in 1.5 million different things. I think I actually just recently saw him as one of the crime lords on the Penguin. But this was really the first instance where I feel like a lot of us were introduced to him as, what was his name that he said? Dr. Marvin something. It's not his real name. They don't use real names, as you learn. But this is really our first major glimpse of the Dharma Initiative, which is this kind of super secret science group that set up all of these different research stations in order to try and research the strange electromagnetic energy that's pulsating from the island. And this is one of the stations that's been set up, referred to as the Swan. Newsflash, this will not be the last one of these stations that we see, but we spend a bulk of this season here. And like they said, there's a couple of clips missing from the station, from the film, so they still don't kind of explicitly tell you what the purpose of the station is or what it's studying, whether it is a psychological experiment in order to study the people who are pushing the button, or whether it is actually the numbers have to be entered in that sequence every 108 minutes in order to prevent some catastrophe from happening. Whatever the case is, it is one of the things where both things could be true. And that kind of, again, is the summation of loss. The fact of, is everything that we're watching real, or do we have to have a little bit of faith that not everything we have is real? And the answer is that it's both. It just depends on which is true at a time. And there are some instances where both is true. And that's kind of, the philosophical, that's why the Schrodinger's cat is a philosophical principle in addition to a scientific principle, because it's the instance where, in the unknowing of which of the two possibilities it is, whether the cat is alive or dead, both can be true at the same time. And that's kind of like I feel like the principle that they're getting at with both the Hatch, the Swan, now as we know it, and with the central theme of the show in general, whether they are just survivors on an island, or whether this is purgatory, or whether this is something kind of in between. The answer is never clear, but if they explicitly tell us the answers, then it just becomes no fun, And in a way, it's kind of the same thing where with Michael, Jin, and Sawyer, as they're being held in the hole, where they think they're being held by the others, but they're actually being held by other people who are on the plane with them. But because those people have gone through different circumstances, they don't necessarily trust them. And now you may discover that they're using interrogation techniques that the others may have used. That's all that I'm going to say. But so Jack and Locke watch the orientation film. Of course, they, Locke is immediately like, Jack, why don't you believe? Why are you so anti-believing? Like the irony being is that Jack is the one that's so anti wanting to do anything or having to do anything with this computer, and immediately doubts it and is like, yeah, nothing is going to happen if we don't push the button. But the irony being that the backstory of this episode is about Locke, and how Locke was a little bit too persistent and couldn't let go of something at one point, because this episode is trying to say how Locke is the one who is kind of unable to let go, how his faith has led him in the wrong direction, because his backstory that we get in this episode is kind of a continuation of what we saw in Deus Ex Machina last season, where his father took his kidney. he's trying to move on, but he just can't. He's going to anger management groups. He just can't take anybody else seriously because he's like, wow, your mom took $30 from you. My dad took my damn kidney after he'd already abandoned me, you know? Then he meets Katie Seagal's character, Helen. Katie Seagal, for any fans of Sons of Anarchy. Gemma from Sons of Anarchy. He meets her at the meeting. They end up hooking up, but he just cannot commit to her. He just cannot stop going and waiting outside his dad's house to the point where his dad even confronts him, gets in the car. It's like, I understand that this may have been hard for you. This was, what was he said? He's
like, you're not the first one to be conned or something along those lines.
He's like, this was amusing at first, but now it's getting annoying. And I just want it to be locking that it just being like, motherfucker, you took my damn kidney. What am I supposed to do in this instance? Just like let it go? It's like, no, it's not that easy. So the backstory there, and eventually it's Helen confronts him and is like, you have to choose me or him, and that's kind of hinting at Locke's overall struggle in the sense of where Locke's biggest problem is that he's incapable of, kind of letting go of those who have wronged him, which has kind of led him down this path of fate. But the irony being that now that seemingly his faith is being rewarded with, as they uncover more and more layers of the island, and as he kind of has anointed himself as one of the protectors of the island, now it's almost like he actually has to fill the Helen role for Jack, where Jack is so hell-bent on not believing anything with the island to the point where when Desmond confronts him, and you even see Desmond finally recognizes him, and he gets to this whole thing of, it's like, the last time I met you, you were worried that you had screwed up with a woman. What ended up happening? Like, did you fix her? And eventually he pushes him to the point where Jack admits, it's like, I married her. And Desmond is like, oh, and you guys aren't married anymore, which I believe this is the last time we see Desmond for a while. But once we get back together with Desmond and we learn more about his backstory, we discover that that's a struggle that Desmond can relate to, is all that we're going to say. We also get some much needed backstory on Desmond as well, where Desmond admits, like, I've been here for 3 years. All I know is I was recruited to come. All I know is I was on a race around the world. My boat crashed here. Then this guy, Kenzie something, Kelvin came out of the jungle, brought me here, said we needed to enter the numbers. We traded back and forth for 3 years. Then Kelvin died, and now I'm stuck here. And Jack's like, you've been here for 3 years. We've been here for 48 days. Nobody's gotten sick at all. So whoever it was that put that quarantine hatch on there, they're lying to you. So, like I said, getting to the whole idea of, like, a couple things are true, where, again, it's tough for me to say knowing what's going to happen without spoiling anything. But essentially, again, it is a thing of where I believe that what the Swan was set up as, like I said, it was set up to serve two purposes. One, because the hitting of the button every 108 minutes does prevent some sort of catastrophe related to the electromagnetic energy that the Dharma Initiative was studying. And it's a psychological experiment in order to study whoever it is that is pushing the button, because like I said, there's still some other questions as well, like how Dharma was able to transport back and forth between the real world and the island. A couple of other things that still need to be filled in. But for the most part, like I said, we're starting to understand, like I said, that there have been other groups that have studied this island throughout history. Because as they said, the Dharma Initiative goes all the way back to 1970. But like I said, there's a long history of this place that predates even that. So what did you think, like, kind of getting into more of, like, the lore and the history of not only the island, but the other groups of people that have discovered the island throughout the past? First Russo's group, which I believe was somewhere in the 90s. And then, what's it called? And because Russo had only been there for 16 years, Desmond's been there for 3 years. And the Dharma Initiative has been set up since 1970, and we assume that they've been there around then. So, like I said, a lot more history and backstory that we're getting into there. So I just wanted to know your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's classic Lost. You get 3 answers and you have five more questions. Because we talked about the season 1 did the heavy lifting, introduce characters, set things in motion, kind of introduce us to the island, and now season 2 we can actually go inward to the island and get more mysterious and sci-fi, which was probably my most anticipated part of the show. Like, just seeing what the hell is up with this island, and the characters are just like an added benefit of that. So yeah, now I'm really starting to, like, okay, I really want to watch the next episode immediately after, but I won't, because I love doing the show.
Yes,
and just the waiting of it is great.
Yes,
the
waiting.
It's like I'm watching it.
The anticipation.
It's like I'm watching it as it releases. So
yes,
just that little thing. So
It's pretty
Dharma
cool. But
Initiative. I told my mom because she's seen the show like I think she watched it like 10 years ago or something, and then I told her, hey, the Dharma Initiative. She's like, yep, I know that, I recognize that. So it is a significant thing in this show. So and back just to mention the countdown real quick. I feel like that's kind of a Chekhov's countdown. Like it will hit zero, and nothing good ever happens at zero.
exactly.
So I'm just curious to see that. Whether it's this season, whether it's in future seasons, we'll get to that, I'm sure.
Yes, you will see. Like I said, remember what I said last episode. Every season finale ends in an explosion of some kind. So just something to keep an eye out for. Oh man, that's the power of these types of shows, man. Is you end up bonding with your other family members who may have seen the show before you, but you guys came to it on your own, so you're able to each have like your own individual relationship with it, and then bond as a result of it. Man, just good stuff. This is the stuff that I love about the things that we do. But yes, you would be correct in the sense of where it is a little bit of a Chekhov's countdown. Something will happen, but we're going to have to wait to find out and see what that's going to be. Like I
Lost
said,
makes you wait, but
loss makes you wait, but it
but
does
the journey
reward
is
you.
worthwhile, and
The journey is worth the while.
it's
Indeed.
enjoyable.
Yes. Like I said, there's a reason why the season finales are always some of the most important episodes. Like we've been saying, season 1 is the character intro episode. It's like the superhero individual backstories. Season 2, that's when we start to get into like more of the lore and the history of the island that will be continued to be explored throughout the rest of the show as the survivors. Like I said, we had hints of the fact that this was no regular deserted island in the first season, and now that those thoughts, those theories, if you will, have been rewarded as we continue to explore that this is not only no ordinary island, but this is an island that people have been exploring and been aware of for a long time. Like I said, we're discovering that the numbers that cursed Hurley for so long serve a purpose here. We're discovering that Locke's faith is being rewarded, but not in the way that he thought. And we discovered that Jack's kind of tumultuous back and forth as a result of kind of his seeming failings in the real world. Because like I said, we learned one more thing where even though, again, he was able to perform this miracle somehow and save this woman who he ended up marrying, unfortunately, that relationship didn't work out. So we kind of could discover how that's like yet another piece of the journey. Like I said, even though the show is kind of transitioning into becoming more plot focused, we are still getting these tidbits of these character backstories in order to help inform on them and their decisions going forward. It's just kind of more in service of a more action and plot based story than it was before. And then also we have this added addition of the tail end survivors that are going to come in, and it's all kind of going to be encircling the hatch. So overall, really, really good episode. Really enjoyable, really fun, really action-packed. At the end, there's kind of what I call a famous Damon Lindelofism, where kind of all of the anxiety of these past built-up issues kind of take center stage in whatever the central conflict of the episode is, and it allows the characters to kind of reach this catharsis. And afterwards, they're not fully healed, but they've managed to kind of resolve something that's kind of been torturing them for a while, where even though Jack is still not on board with Locke completely, Locke is able to get him to ultimately push the execute button at the end. As far as, for lack of a better word, it's taking the leap of faith, if you will. So, well, is the conflict between them over? Absolutely not, because of course Jack is still going to be questioning everything up until the day he dies. But for now, at the very least, this one conflict of discovering what the hatch is has been assuaded, and now the Desmond's gone. The survivors realize they're like, okay, this is the next stage of our mission.
And he said the line that you said, see
Yep.
you in another life.
See you in
which
another
you
life.
said
Exactly.
that earlier in the
Desmond's
show.
Desmond's classic line right there is what that is. But yeah, good episode overall. Like I said, probably I still don't know if I like it more than Man of Science, Man of Faith, but still, like I said, season 2 is heating up, is all that I will say. And we're going to keep going, and we're going to keep discovering what the hatch is, and we're going to keep getting more pieces of people's backstories. And now that the tail end survivors have officially been set up, we're going to, again, we understand that they will eventually reconnect with the main group of survivors. And then once they discover the hatch, and where things will go from there. So, like I said, a little bit of a shorter recap this week, but we're coming back very soon, as in right after this stream, for our reviews, respectively, of the premiere of Daredevil, Born Again. This is a very, very important one, both for the MCU and for media going forward. And a movie that we saw this past weekend, Mickey 17, which again is one that I know that you've been looking forward to for a while. I myself, I thought one thing going into this movie, and I got something completely different coming out of it, which those usually result in my favorite movie. So stay tuned for our reviews of those. Those will be coming up shortly. All right, people, round 2. And yeah, that's right. We had two big things dropped this past weekend that were worthy of its own episode outside of Talking Lost. The return of Daredevil, a thing I didn't think I was going to see ever again, as well as a new movie that is actually a little thought-provoking and actually worth having a discussion about. Mickey 17, Luke, you read this book, so you have more backstory on it than me. Before we get started, what's one thing you can say? Do you think they nailed the adaptation?
I think they improved on it because whatever they did to the third act, they changed a few things. They made it a bit more compelling. People have been saying they don't really like the third act. I don't know. I
I don't know.
had
I'm
no
a fan
problems
of
with
that
it.
third act. I love what I
I
saw.
enjoyed the book, and I said, it kind of has a 4-star hard ceiling from me. But Bong Joon Ho delivered exactly what I was hoping for, and Robert Pattinson was a big part of that. So
Yes,
we'll get
indeed.
into it.
We will get into that. All of that and more on today's episode of the Talkin' TV podcast. Stay tuned. All right, guys, that's right. We actually have a new movie to review. I think this is our first our second major movie review for 2025 after the stink that was Brave New World. Probably, if I had to guess, we're probably gonna we're gonna cover Magazine Dreams in 2 weeks, but our next big one is probably not gonna be until Sinners comes out in April. But Bong Joon Ho, his first movie since Parasite, the big Best Picture win, the last Best Picture win pre-COVID. And needless to say, I thought that this was a confusing choice at first. I'm like, oh, so he's going into science fiction. I'm like, okay. I'm like, he hasn't done one of these in a while. I think the last of not since Snowpiercer at the very least, which again that was supposed to be his first major English language debut, and then Harvey Weinstein kind of fucked him over on that release right there. But he's an interesting filmmaker. He likes to delve a lot into, big things with big ideas about social commentary in very, very gonzo forms. For anybody who's seen his film The Host, which is a not so subtle commentary on how we're polluting things. It's more like a modern day Godzilla in the sense of where all the pollution causes this giant fish to mutate and come out of the water and start attacking people. That's kind of a fun one, but rather bleak. The thing about Bong that I appreciate as a filmmaker is that he not only is he unsubtle, but he's not afraid to kind of show things for how they are, for lack of a better word. And kind of that ties into the marketing of the trailer and why I think that is a reason for why people are having the reaction to this movie that they are. I don't think it necessarily has anything to do with the movie. I think that it's the fact that ultimately this is a situation where Warner Brothers had no idea who they were getting into bed with. And then, frankly, once the movie was finished, especially after the strikes and knowing that they needed to have some sort of a hit on their hands, they were like, yeah, we have no idea how to market this. Because this movie, let me tell you something. This, right off the bat, I can tell you guys, this movie is not the movie that was marketed to us in the trailers, first and foremost. I mean, you can agree with that, right?
I think you can kind of like the first trailer. We had the Dean Martin song. Like I think remember people having like a whoa, this is gonna be like a fun, goofy sci-fi thing. Like I thought it was
Right.
gonna be serious. I mean, guys, the book is very
Well, you read the
unserious.
well, you read the
Yeah.
well. I mean, you read the book,
It
so
was
like,
just kind of interesting to see like what they
right,
were expecting and what it was gonna be. So,
right,
but I agree with you. It is kind of a hard movie to market because like
yeah.
who is really the target audience here, and
Well, it's a couple.
what kind of movie is it trying to be?
It's a couple different things, right? It's first of all, this movie doesn't really have one genre that it goes for, right? And American studios love to like place movies inside these genre boxes, right, and not let them out. This movie has like is bouncing around between so many different genres. Some that it does better than others. Like I said, you got social commentary, you got dystopia, you got political thriller, you got sci-fi body horror, you got some of times of which is deviated. And then all of a sudden it turns into a creature feature near the end too, like kind of out of nowhere as well. And it does all kind of tie in and is in service to the story. But again, it can be a little bit confusing. That's the first thing. The second thing is, and this might be a little bit of a difference of a distinct difference between when you get a foreign filmmaker making kind of an American film. And again, for anybody who's familiar with his previous two American efforts, Okja and Snowpiercer, they would know. But this is really, I think, the first one of his that's like kind of being mass marketed on like a mainstream level. Snowpiercer got its entire marketing campaign fucked by the Weinsteins, and Okja was right to Netflix. So it's kind of understandable why Parasite kind of was this big, main event and kind of like his breakout, to the world. So, because, foreign filmmakers will sometimes have that. You had that, I feel like, with Fernando Morales back in the early 2000s with City of God, as well as Park Chan-wook with Old Boy as well, which I believe was the same year. But it kind of, every once in a while, you'll have like this foreign filmmaker that kind of breaks through, but it's happening a lot more frequently now because of the much higher ease of access to foreign films as well. Obviously, you look at what happened with the director of Godzilla -1, and then Raisuke Hamaguchi with Drive My Car, and Ruben Östlund with Triangle of Sadness, and how the Oscars really have, in becoming bigger and larger and more diversified, have they have done a much better job of shining a light on international cinema. And so kind of as a result, that's kind of part of the reason, and really it's the Oscar win as far as why Warner was willing to take a risk on Bong Joon Ho like this. Again, giving him $100 million and a blank check. And it just always makes me laugh whenever a studio gets in, because it doesn't happen that often anymore, whenever a studio gets into bed with a kind of more of a risque filmmaker who's used to kind of making, doing what he wants, and really like actually having an auteur vision with the film, and then having no idea how to market it. That just always makes me laugh, because it's like, I'm like, yeah, that's on you guys for thinking that you were going to get like a straight clean cut movie. So it's probably
And there's also that big, like, kind of not a fiasco, but like who has the final cut? Does Bong Joon Ho have the final cut? Does Zaslav of all
right.
people? Or but yeah.
Right. And so that leads to my other questions. Do you think there was potentially some footage of this movie that was left on the cutting, or potentially an alternative cut of this movie that was left on the cutting room floor?
Only one thing, and it involved both Pattinsons in a bed situation. I was
Yes.
like, why?
Well,
We had to see that.
they kind of sort of did that
Yeah.
with the three-way scene with Naomi
Yeah.
Ackie, but yeah, that was probably a thing of where it's like, yeah, we probably we don't need to include this.
Other than that, no. I mean, they change a few things, but nothing like, we needed to see that. There's just more shenanigans of the Mickeys like replacing each other in situations where
Right.
like, you're supposed to be here, I'm supposed to be there, and like,
Right. So
but
potentially
that's just gonna
some more of the comedic bits
yeah,
that they cut.
that's more just gonna fluff the runtime, and it's not essential to the story.
Right,
Basically.
exactly. So it seemed like for the most part they did a pretty good job of cutting the fat and getting to the kind of the essential bits of the story. So essentially what we have here is, like I said, I don't even know where to begin with describing this movie, but essentially this movie takes place in a future dystopia where basically entire factions of people are leaving the Earth and settling on other planets. So we've kind of already gotten past the point of colonizing other planets. So now we're just like, looking for other worlds to settle on because of various and sort of different reasons. Pattinson's character Mickey unfortunately gets caught in a situation where he owes a big debt to a loan shark that is not exactly friendly when it comes to collecting on his debts. Enjoys to do things with a double chainsaw. So him and his friend, portrayed by Steven Yeun, decide to sign up for a position on a ship so they can get as far away from Earth as possible. And Pattinson, left with little to no other options or really no skills, is forced to sign up as an expendable, which brings in kind of the sci-fi the sci-fi moral ethical debate of this movie, which is basically where several years as well before this movie, there was this scientist that invented this cloning procedure, essentially, where which would allow him to basically go out and murder people. And as a result, the procedure was banned. But it was then kind of retrofitted by this corrupt government official, portrayed by Mark Ruffalo, who is very, very obviously doing, they're very obviously modeling that character off of Trump. Mark Ruffalo's character also has this very large overbite, which is characteristic of him, where essentially he jury rigs this program and uses it in his favor, where he's like, well, look, the idea of multiple clones of one person should be banned, but we can clone one person over and over and over again, kind of take their memories, download them into this one brick, and just re-upload them, and we can just use them for all the dirty tasks that nobody wants to do. So that is, of course, unfortunately, what befalls poor Mickey in this movie, where he is forced to die over and over and over again. What's it called? For various and sort of different purposes, testing out vaccines, doing manual labor that will more than likely result in him dying. And I guess kind of right off the bat, the way that the movie makes its distinct mark, and again, this may have been a deliberate thing on the part of the marketing, is the movie basically takes what the trailer showed was going to be like this riot, laugh a minute fest of, oh, he's just dying in various and assorted stupid ways, and it kind of becomes a Groundhog's Day where he's just dying over and over again, and we just see him being reprinted in fast fashion. And immediately off the bat, the movie tells you, no, that's not what this is at all. They show that this is a rather bleak, miserable situation to be like, because even though he dies over and over again, and he just keeps coming back, and it's like a temporary blip, and then he's back because his memories just get downloaded into whatever new purpose. He's like, I really hate dying because it sucks having to go through this over and over and over again. And the movie really hammers home kind of the point of, the very obvious metaphor of, people being kind of used as just labor drones, essentially, then just dispatched of when the higher ups no longer need them. Only in this case, they, rather than having that happen with, multiple groups of people, just one person stepping up to replace the next, it's just one person that you just see kind of that vicious cycle to happen over and over and over again. And that's just one of many, many, many different things that this movie is playing around with. But I think that kind of where it impresses me is the fact that it is so ballsy and so willing to mix the metaphor with the story in such a ham-handed way. But for me, it works. I know for some people it may not, but for me, it all works as far as everything this movie is going for. Because I think it really comes down to your familiarity with Bong as a filmmaker. And if you understand that this is what he has done with pretty much every single one of his movies, like really the only big difference between this and Parasite, besides the fact that Parasite is not sci-fi based, is that Parasite is set in Korea and entirely in Korean. But for the most part, these movies are dealing with a lot of very similar themes in terms of class disparity, in terms of using the lower downs as kind of, in order to work these menial jobs that you don't necessarily want to work, kind of treating them as the slave labor force. And that's just, like I said, just one aspect of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I've only seen Parasite and Snowpiercer. I should get to the other ones because I've loved all of his movies so far. And yeah, you point out those class and job type themes that it covers, and maybe it's obvious, but like, what's wrong with it with being obvious in this kind of quirky sci-fi setting, and it balances that and entertainment with the theme stuff quite well, I think. Robert Pattinson brings both the comedic and the seriousness and part of it, and there's also that aspect of like, that reprinting of like, okay, am I really the same person after getting reprinted, or there's that scene where 17 and 18 are like trying to kill each other, essentially. Like I'm kind of used to it. I usually wake up, but then now you're here and I'm not
Yes.
going to wake up. So I thought that was pretty
Yeah.
interesting scene as well.
Yeah, they're having these conversations throughout as far as like, okay, I'm you, but I'm also me, And it's like, before it was, again, I would just die and I would just get reprinted. So I would just wake up again. But now that I'm seeing kind of like, what happens, now that I'm seeing what happens, I see that I'm like, oh, I actually like, I can be like my own individualistic person. And obviously the personality differences between 17 and 18, because obviously, yes, even though it's the same memories, every clone is not going to have the same personality type. And so the majority of this movie, because basically, again, this is something the trailer spoiled, where he's going out on an ice expedition in order to kind of explore the terrain. He falls down a hole. He's left to die, presumably to get eaten by these creatures that they discovered, that they refer to. What do they call them? Lurkers?
Creepers.
Which they're
Not to
basically
be
like,
confused with the Minecraft movie coming out in a month.
exactly, which we will not be reviewing or covering,
No.
because I am done giving any sort of traction to movies that just blatantly tell you that they're going to be shit. They kind of look like these. So he basically stumbles upon this nest of creatures that look like these large furry caterpillar hybrid things. And rather than going through the science fiction trope and viciously eating him, they actually end up letting him go. So he's like, okay, that was weird. He ends up going back to the ship, and unfortunately discovers that they've already reprinted a new version, Mickey 18, who is a lot, how do I describe this? A lot more meaner, a lot more tough, a lot more jaded than Mickey 17, who's kind of just more goofy and lackadaisical and willing to go along with things. So that, of course, leads to a tussle. A very final tussle, because again, as they reveal, the idea of replicating someone over and over again after they've already died is barely legal, it is still legal. It is not even close to ethical. It is still legal, but the idea of multiples is strictly banned. So that, of course, raises a whole bunch of problems. And as well as getting into the whole idea of, are you me? Which one is the real Mickey? Blah blah blah. And that, of course, again, ties into, the political ramifications of the ship being led by the corrupt senator or whatever government official it is, played by Mark Ruffalo, and his wife, played by Toni Collette.
An
You have
incredibly sleazy Ruffalo. Like
yes,
no one's more sleazy than this version of
you can tell
Ruffalo.
that this is just one of those parts that he was just absolutely having a ball with. Like I said, that stupid overbite that was like so distinct, you know?
Between this and Poor Things, like Ruffalo's becoming like this
Yeah.
this comedic genius almost. So
Yes, he is. Very, 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 yeah, again, he very much understands the material that he is being given here. Like I said, the social satire as well. You know, the Naomi Ackie character is how she's kind of like, you know, kind of, for lack of a better word, using Pattinson is just for sex, essentially. And then, like, how they come up with, like, all those different drawings of, like, what they're going to do. I thought that bit was good. Stephen Yeun's character, how he is also kind of delightfully sleazy, where he's Pattinson's friend, but really it's kind of more so they're kind of stuck together through circumstance rather than because they actually enjoy each other. Where it's revealed that kind of Stephen Yeun is the source of all of Pattinson's pain, where he's back on Earth. He was the one who convinced him to enter into this very, very stupid franchise idea that, of course, forced them to get this loan from this loan shark, then put them in debt. And then, of course, once they both escape and get out of the ship, Stephen Yeun gets an immediately better position where he's just kind of he's a pilot, while Pattinson is forced to become an expendable. And then, you know, Stephen Yeun is revealed to have become a drug dealer on the ship, dealing like this very banned stuff. So once again, showing that, like, you know, people within the working class that are profiting off of the pain and suffering of others. So again, that was very on those. Like I said, this movie is dealing with a lot. And again, it's one of those instances where it is more so allegorical of our time rather than trying to get across like one specific distinct message. And as a result, you can kind of like have fun with the wacky, random, batshit sci-fi setting. You know, like I was having fun, like actually like watching a movie where I felt like I was actually transported to a different world and that I was going on a journey with these characters in addition to, you know, kind of the blatant messaging in there. So I guess kind of when I point out the unsubtle messaging and why that doesn't bother me, it's because it's always in service of the story. It's never not in service of the story. Whereas so much of the time I feel like so much the messaging is all the movie has because the story itself sucks. But the story here is actually pretty damn compelling, if I do say so myself. It's juggling a lot, for sure. And people might need to go back and rewatch this a couple of times in order to kind of get the full and obvious meaning. But for me, this is, I'm like, it's damn good sci-fi storytelling.
yeah, absolutely. Just and it kind of eases you into it. Like you have the narration that you know, it's like you're reading a book. You have the narration, which you
Right.
really don't see a lot in movies, but they kind of make it work. Maybe it's just Robert Pattinson's freaky little voice that he does. Like you said, he's kind of like the next Christian Bale, where he's
He really
Batman,
is.
but he's also like this chameleon. And I think for the next decade or so, he will just continue to do these freak characters,
Which I'm all in favor of.
with
I
a
am
Batman
all in
movie
favor
every
of that.
5 years.
Yeah,
'Cause
and that's the thing. It's funny. He even made the joke where he's like, "I know I was originally cast as the younger Batman, but like by the time I'm gonna be 41 by the time this new Batman movie comes out. So like, doesn't that make me not the young Batman anymore? Like, and to put that in perspective, so the previous Batman, the actor Christian Bale was only 30 when he got the first Batman, when he got Batman Begins, but then Dark Knight and Dark Knight Rises were only each of those movies was only 3 and 4 years apart respectively. So he was only 41 by the time the third movie came out, not the second, you know? So that's kind of the issue that we find ourselves in. But the reason why I said that about Pattinson is because it's not just that they both played Batman and are these kind of chameleon-esque actors. It's because they both were, again, people forget how young Bale was when he started. Bale was a kid, like I believe only like 12 or 13 years old when he starred in Steven Spielberg's Empire of the Sun. And then he was this kid heartthrob, this young heartthrob in his 20s throughout the 90s, you know, in the 90s movie version of Little Women, ironically playing the Timothée Chalamet part, and also had a brief voiceover in Pocahontas. Again, people forget that was kind of where Christian Bale you know, kind of was in his career for a long time, and how the previous generations have this entirely different relationship with him before he does American Psycho. And that's kind of when he becomes because it's really American Psycho and then followed up by Batman Begins as far as when he becomes the Christian Bale that we all know. And Pattinson's kind of had a similar career trajectory where, again, for so long, he was Edward Cullen from Twilight, and he was stuck in that window for so long, and Hollywood really kind of would not let him out, and he was so desperate to want to do these different and more interesting types of work and types of parts that he really kind of had to go in the complete opposite direction. And it's really not until he starts working with David Cronenberg in 2012 with Cosmopolis that things start to kind of shift for him a little bit, because then he does Maps of the Stars, then he does The Rover, and then he does Good Time with the Safdies, and that's kind of when things start to turn around for him a little bit, and that's kind of when things, that's when he gets The Lighthouse and Tenet and Batman and Devil All the Time, and you start to see him do, like I said, these interesting, weird, wacky, chameleonic parts. Again, he was the standout part for a Miyazaki dub last year simply because of the voice that he did. And now you see here he's playing clones, he's playing more downtrodden, he's trying to ugly himself up. He's doing different wacky and assorted voices. He's getting down and dirty, with sex. He's dying in various and different assorted ways. He really does get to flex his actor chops in this movie. And it really, he clearly has an understanding of the source material. Bong Joon Ho talked about in interviews how he wanted to work with Pattinson for a while after seeing what he did in Good Time and in The Lighthouse, specifically those two movies. And if you look at those two movies, I feel like those are kind of, in a weird way, like the inspiration. You kind of see Mickey, both sides of Mickey in both those parts, where 18 is his character, Connie from Good Time, and 17 is his character. What was his guy? I don't remember his character's name from The Lighthouse. Thomas, I think, was his character's name there.
He was like faking a name or something.
Something like that. He wasn't who he said he was. Yes. But the point being is that, like, you kind of see that, like, this is kind of where Pattinson has been building himself up to, and the reason why this is such an important movie in his career, because this is clearly the type of actor that he's always wanted to be. And now that he's had this, and it's coming off of the backs of Batman, and the fact that he was able to prove himself, and so many people reacted so positively to that movie, really shows how, he really finally has done what is even more difficult to do in Hollywood now, than it was before, which is he's really managed to achieve that career turnaround, essentially, and become like this very distinct and different actor. And it makes me excited for the types of parts that he's going to be doing coming up, obviously. So, some parts that he's got coming up, he's going to be in Die My Love, the Lynn Ramsey movie with Jennifer Lawrence, is coming out later this year. And then obviously the big one next year, he was one of the first people announced in Chris Nolan's Odyssey, reuniting with him there. Also, low-key, with the fact that we have Pattinson to kind of thank for Nolan's Oscar win, because without Pattinson giving Nolan the Oppenheimer book while they're promoting Tenet, who knows if that's what Nolan does as his next movie, and we may never have Oscar-winning Christopher Nolan, and we might not have the Odyssey. So Pattinson's responsible for a lot of the things that we have now that we loved from the last couple of years.
And I'm sure we'll see Pattinson being the lead of a Nolan movie. Maybe not his next one, but within the next two after the Odyssey, because that seems to be the trajectory.
Yes, because that's the thing. If you follow the Nolan trajectory, Nolan's path, it's about 3 to 4 years minimum in between movies, because after Dark Knight Rises, Interstellar was 2 years later, 2014, then Dunkirk is 2017, Tenet 2020, Oppenheimer 2023, and now Odyssey is going to be 26. So it's about a 3-year gap. So after Odyssey, I'd say we'll look forward to 2029 for whatever the next Nolan movie
I already
will be.
am. Like,
I've already got that release date, that 3rd or 4th weekend in July. I've got that booked out for every 3 years for the next 2 decades, or however long Nolan's going to be making movies. I have those dates marked out. But yeah, so really kind of the only last thing that I have to say about it is kind of, again, the third act becomes a little bit clustered, but again, it's unconventional in a way that I was not expecting, where they kind of they discover the creepers, and they discover that rather than being kind of these parasites that want to kill all of humanity, they actually are these semi-intelligent beings that are actually capable of kind of cohabitation and able to kind of communicate with others once these scientists build these translating devices. And one of the creepers, one of the baby creepers, is found inside of this rock that they bring into the ship that they plan on mining and basically using and as the monument to celebrate them arriving on this planet, which they also, it's funny because they named it literally after one of the 9 realms from Asgard, Niflheim. That's literally what they call the planet. So I thought that was pretty funny there. That must have been like a little insert, little reference to Marvel there. And so in keeping this creature captive, they discover all the other creatures surrounding the ship and kind of, in pain. And so the Pattinsons are sent out to kind of deal with that. And it goes in a bunch of wild and crazy directions that you would not expect. Yeah, like I said, I don't want to get too much into it because I don't want to spoil it for people who haven't seen it. But I will say, this one's definitely worth the watch. Definitely check it out. Again, it's more off the beaten path, and the reason why I like to champion these kinds of movies is because these kinds of movies not only don't ever get like a mainstream budget and mainstream attention outside of Oscar season, but studios are so willing to not only take a risk on movies like this, but to market movies like this. Like this got like a pretty decent sized marketing campaign, and it's been a long time since I've seen like a non-IP based movie get that sort of a marketing campaign. It's kind of why I was looking forward to this year so much, because you're not getting the typical kind of campaigns for like the big budget IPs. Like obviously, yes, you have your Jurassic Worlds, your Fantastic Fours, your Supermans.
God, I cannot stand to see that Jurassic World trailer before every single movie
Yeah,
until
there's a reason.
July. I'll watch the Superman trailer every time,
Yeah,
but the Jurassic World, I'm like, okay, we get it.
There's a reason why I'm skipping trailers going forward for the movie theaters. But like again, the fact that movies like this, movies like Sinners, movies like outside of the A24 and Neon, the fact that movies like that are getting not only decent sized budgets that are going to really incredible filmmakers, but they're getting marketing campaigns worthy of it. It shows that perhaps the film industry could finally be getting back to, marketing some original ideas, which again, I never thought I was going to see again. So that's kind of why I always like to champion movies like this.
And the budget absolutely shows, because like,
oh yeah,
the CG is flawless.
It's
Like
great.
after seeing like a Marvel movie every 3 months with some really questionable CGI, here it's like there's interesting shots. There's great set design. All of the creepers look fantastic. Like
Yes.
just Pattinson just like standing next to one, interacting with it. It's just it's all the money's on the screen. Like.
Yes, and it really shows. And also, again, it's the thing of where like Bong clearly knew what he was doing as well, because it's directed pretty seamlessly for a dude who I mean, yes, he directed Snowpiercer, which also had like a lot of big technical movie parts, but like Bong's really never done a movie like this, a big kind of science fiction, not epic, but a big science fiction kind of social commentary science fiction. This movie also has some elements of The Thing, the greatest science fiction closeted body horror movie ever made. But like it's got elements of The Fly, it's got elements of Multiplicity. It's paying homage to all of the sci-fi greats that came before it as well, while also kind of doing its own thing and being rather unique. So that's why for me, I gave this was an easy 4.5 out of 5 stars. I really had a good time with this.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it the 4 stars that I predicted. It didn't fully wow me, but it did everything I wanted it to, and a little bit more, because the third act, I read a while ago, so I don't fully recollect it, but this was more engaging, more conflicts, like the little creeper on the ship, that I don't think that was in the book at all. So yeah,
Yeah,
4 stars.
Yeah, and the thing that I appreciated as well about that one aspect is that like the little creeper came out, and of course you're expecting it to like start attacking people and killing them, but instead it's just like running away, and it seems scared. And the amount of empathy that you're able to develop towards these creatures, especially once they start threatening to harm it, you're like, oh, like the point where they cut off its tail and it's screaming in pain, and then they almost dip it into the lava pit. I was like, oh no! I was like, oh, I'm like, wait, I'm actually feeling something for this little creature on screen. I don't remember the last time I actually did that, for a movie. So it's been a long time, but possibly Mickey 17, possibly a sign that things could be getting back to the way that things were, as far as getting back to things that we actually enjoyed and appreciated about movies. It's been a long time since that's been the case. But yeah, now and of course back to business as usual. As you well know, we had our little side tangent talking about our nice little original movie, but now it's back to the business at hand. The latest MCU property has dawned its way on us. And after the disaster show of Captain America Brave New World last month, we have the return. He has been hinted at. First in Spider-Man No Way Home, then in She-Hulk. But now we're back in the dirty streets of Hell's Kitchen. No more crazy flying costumes. No more alien invasions. We're back to the gritty street crime that made us fall in love with the show when it premiered on Netflix 10 years ago this year, which is absolutely baffling to me that it's been that long. Obviously, again, one of the big announcements at Comic-Con a few years ago was that Daredevil himself, portrayed by Charlie Cox, would be returning. But of course, it wasn't in the form originally that we thought, because again, this show was originally creatively overhauled as well. That there was going to be a previous incarnation that did not feature the return of Karen or Foggy. It was only going to bring back Matt and Fisk. It was not going to be a continuation of the Netflix show originally. It was going to be its own thing that was taking place within the MCU. And then finally, somebody behind the scenes took a look at it and was like, not only is this bad, because I believe in the original incarnation, Matt doesn't put on the costume for until like episode 4. They're like, not only is this bad, but this doesn't make any sense in terms of the continuity. We should just, reconnect it to the original. So they did this massive creative overhaul. They delayed it a year. They brought back Karen and Foggy. John Berthel was confirmed. Wilson Bethel was confirmed to have been returned as Bullseye. Isla Zur was confirmed to be returning as Vanessa. And now here we are. Daredevil Born Again aired its first 2 episodes this past Wednesday. And needless to say, it took the internet by storm. People are, of course, going nuts, being like, this is the best Marvel thing that they've had in years. So, Luke, brass tacks, are we back? What do we think of the return of Daredevil?
I think we're only 2 episodes in, so we can't fully judge it. But I'd say we are definitely back to a great extent, especially on the MCU Disney Plus space, because this is like miles above most of the stuff. Like, I enjoy parts of Loki, but it took a while to get there. But this, like, just from the start, it's better than like anything they've done. Like, and maybe the first few WandaVision episodes were good before it fell back into typical MCU. But yeah, we are back with Daredevil.
We are definitely back. And it's funny because you pointed this out when you first posted about the episode, when you're like, finally, they're treating it like a TV show, which the problem with all of Marvel's shows up until this point was that they were not shows. They were extended 6-part movies released on a weekly basis, except for WandaVision, which was 9 episodes as well. So, like I said, the reason why WandaVision gets a little bit of a pass is because that show was actually trying to do a little bit something extra in terms of how it would pay homage to the history of TV. But all the other shows, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the first season of Loki, I would say, Hawkeye, Moon Knight, Miss Marvel, all of these shows, don't even get me started on She-Hulk, Secret Invasion, all of these shows were trying to be like these extended 6-part movies, and the kind of approach to them, how they were trying to, it just wasn't working ultimately at the end of the day, on top of the consistency with which they were putting them out. The fact that we got all of those shows over the course of over a 2-year period, it was just too much. So Marvel made a very smart choice. They very much pulled back. They kind of dumped Echo last year because they knew they just needed to get that out there. And they kind of put a decent amount of marketing behind Agatha, but even Agatha kind of felt like more of a, corny, like throwback homage to like, the Sabrina the Teenage Witch kind of era of TV filmmaking. Now, again, Daredevil's a little bit different because this isn't just some new side character that Marvel's kind of throwing out there. This is a continuation of arguably one of their most, if not their most successful TV show prior to the big Disney Plus correction, as I call them. Because the thing about it is that people forget is this is from a different era, a different time of Marvel TV making, where the TV shows at this time, when Daredevil was originally on Netflix, were largely disconnected from the shows. I mean, you had Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., right, on ABC, but the movies tended to but completely ignore the events of everything that were going on in that show. And so as a result, all of the Netflix shows, not just Daredevil, but the other shows that followed it up, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, and The Punisher, were kind of able to remain separate from the movies and kind of help to fill out the MCU and really kind of dive in and explore these heroes in a much different tonal and genre specific kind of way. With Luke Cage paying homage to blaxploitation, Jessica Jones being much more so about victims of domestic violence and gaslighting, and then Iron Fist, well, we don't talk about that. Punisher, kind of moving past, trauma of past actions and PTSD. And Daredevil is kind of being the one that kicked off this flagship effort on Netflix, just being so distinct, so unique, so different, kind of be mixing in elements of martial arts and vigilantism, while at the same time kind of being like this legal drama essentially, and really kind of capturing the essence of the character in the way that the Ben Affleck movie from the early 2000s really didn't. And it really was a kind of this special, very distinct, very unique era before it unfortunately was canceled when Netflix canceled all the shows, when Disney, kind of pulled the licensing from them and reverted the rights back to Marvel. And then there were obviously hints that we would see these characters again, post-COVID, once a big great COVID correction happened, but it wasn't confirmed until we saw Charlie Cox actually pop up in Spider-Man No Way Home. And that was only the first of many cameos that popped up in that movie. People were obviously like, oh my God, like, does this mean that Daredevil's coming back? And then I believe it was at Comic-Con. I don't remember if it was at Comic-Con 22 or 23 that when Kevin Feige first announced that Daredevil would be returning. So we're finally here all these years later. We're back post the creative overhaul, obviously, that happened post the strikes and post, the Disney correction, Bob Chapek leaving, Bob Iger returning, them really putting all of the MCU into this massive overhaul. Brave New World hopefully being the last victim of kind of the previous regime of Marvel, as we continue to move away from the old stuff, Kang and that direction is now completely gone, and we're moving back towards now Robert Downey Jr. as Dr. Doom as the new direction that we're going towards. But for now, the thing that I liked about these first 2 episodes, after that preamble's out of the way, is that it captures what it seems to be getting back to the essence of what made the Netflix show great originally, which is that, again, it was largely disconnected from the MCU as a whole. It was very much so isolated in its own universe. It was very street level. It was very grounded, outside of Matt's powers, kind of, the this kind of echolocation that he was gifted with as a result of, the chemicals that blinded him. Other than that, and a couple of janky CGI shots in the first episode. Again, it's very, very grounded, very hand-to-hand combat based. The opening sequence, you get this insane action sequence between him and Bullseye, which is this one tracking shot that's following them up this staircase. And the big thing that's kind of established in these first couple episodes, Matt hasn't been Daredevil for a while after the events of the Netflix series. And in the wake of him giving up the Daredevil identity, he's kind of forced to possibly reconsider putting the mask back on when his old foe, Wilson Fisk, not only gets out of jail, but is elected mayor of New York. And yet another instance that is very, very emblematic of today's day and age, a former criminal being elected to a very higher position in an attempt to atone for their past. And, there's just so many things that they are able to accomplish in these first 2 episodes. And kind of how they're reestablishing, for kind of Daredevil's return into the MCU and really into this kind of subsect of the MCU, if you will. The show was almost playing around with this self-aware angle of, we know it's been a long time, you haven't been around, but now things may be happening that called that maybe we need a little vigilante action back on the streets of New York. Like I said, unlike Daredevil, which made the original incarnation on Netflix, which made some reference to the greater MCU, the fact that the Daredevil premiered only a couple years after the first Avengers, and they were making reference to the Chitauri. Now we're living in a new version of the world where, again, post the Thanos snap, everybody on Earth kind of just be like, yeah, we get invaded by aliens like every other week. Nobody really cares, But now that we're on Disney Plus, like, could that open the door for something that comes in at the end? Obviously we know that this will not be the last of the street level heroes that will get back in the show. We know that John Berthel's Punisher is coming as well. We also have been introduced to another street level vigilante, Hector Ayala's White Tiger character, where, again, that's unfortunately another situation where the actor who plays him, Camar de los Reyes, I believe is the name, unfortunately passed away from cancer 2 years ago. So already, like I said, we hit the ground running, and we did not stop. There's a very shocking decision that the show makes in terms of opening it, which, again, for anybody who's seen the show, they kind of know what that is. But already off the bat, like I said, the show hits the ground running and does not stop. So, like I said, I just kind of dumped a lot of preamble on you. So, kind of what are your thoughts just overall on everything that's happened so far in these first 2 episodes?
Yeah, just immediately. I only watched it for the first time like a few months ago, so this is all fairly fresh to me. So just seeing him back isn't that crazy to me as it is for a lot of people, I'm sure. But regardless, it's good to be back, and immediately you get that, okay, this MCU show is gonna have some sauce to it from that whole opening section. Wilson Bethel's Bullseye is just this completely perfect psycho, like, he's just throwing knives into Matt. Like, he takes a pause mid-fight just to kill someone who's
But
just
the amount of
standing by.
knives that
Like,
Matt had sticking out of him after that fight, I'm like, this shouldn't be possible, but it's so awesome, I don't even care.
yeah, I'm like, I've seen season 2 where he fights. What's the guy's name? I forget.
Oh,
Nobu.
Nobu,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. That was some pretty brutal fights there, and so I'm glad they can continue the brutalness of that Netflix series, because they always say, oh, Moon Knight's this super brutal thing. Like, no, it wasn't. But this time they actually do deliver, and so there's that opening sequence, and there's just a lot of dialogue because TV is the dialogue
Yes, TV
format.
is
Like,
people talking in rooms.
yeah, and they do that perfectly. Like, you get there's a diner scene with him and Fisk, which is great. He has a new girlfriend now, so that's going to lead somewhere.
Yep.
She's Fisk's therapist, so that's going to fold in somehow, I'm sure.
Yep.
So
All of these different plot beats that are being set up for us to
there's a
watch
little
throughout.
nod to Spider-Man, so he's
Yep.
out there.
Yep.
We haven't seen him in 4 years. We're not going to see him because there's the Sony deal that puts things in the way. But he's got a movie next year, which is
Yes,
great.
he does. only a couple months after Avengers Doomsday as well. So we're gonna
Yes.
see how that happens and how that's gonna fit in chronologically.
So, but yeah, just seeing him in this greater MCU universe post blip. So yeah, I'm ready to get into it because real TV, because
Yes,
this is
real
what
TV.
it's like. It took them like 10 shows to figure it out,
Yes.
but yeah.
Before they realize, hey, that whole making each 6 episode thing a movie, maybe that's not working out so well. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. Exactly. It's like TV of old. I literally started watching the first episode. I felt like no time had passed with that opening, with that very, very jarring and surprising and shocking opening sequence that we've been hinting at. And like you were saying, that he's seeing Karen has moved to San Francisco after that opening sequence. He's starting to see a new girl played by Margarita Levieva, or for those who know about Adventureland, Susie P from Adventureland. Fisk is having marital problems with Vanessa, despite being the mayor of New York. Clearly tied to him being injured by Bullseye at the end of season 3, where he had to go away for a while. He's lost a significant chunk of weight. He's got a new group of cronies surrounding him. One of which, I don't know if you know it, is being portrayed by the one and only Michael Gandolfini, James Gandolfini, the son of the late great James
I saw
Gandolfini,
that name in the
and
opening credits.
he's starting to emulate his dad. I mean, him playing the younger version of the character that his dad made so iconic a couple years ago in Many Saints of Newark was already kind of telling enough as far as where his career trajectory was going to go. But I've been seeing him in the few things that he's been popping up in as he's been getting a little older. He's 25 now. So, yeah, but he's been getting a little heavier, a little huskier. His accent's starting to come out more. I'm like, oh, shit. I'm like, are we seeing him, like, evolve into it, like, become his dad? Which, if that's the case, I mean, Gandolfini was a very, very troubled individual behind the scenes, but man, that dude was a hell of an actor, is all I'm going to say. And if his son could kind of be like Gandolfini 2.0, so like that was something I was really interesting. Also, the fact that he's being mentored by D'Onofrio's Kingpin, who was one of so many characters that was like almost directly modeled after Tony Soprano, this kind of larger than life, very menacing figure that had like this childlike mentality, this childlike delicacy to it, which is what motivated and informed so many of his decisions. It's so on the nose and so smart with how it's doing that. And like you were saying, yeah, the street level setting us up for plot lines that will be paid off over the course of these 9 episodes. Also, the fact that this is not the last of Daredevil that we're getting, because this got originally an 18-episode order that was split into 2 batches of 9, so we'll be getting the next 9 next year as well. So we won't have another like potentially 3-year wait between these seasons, which is so satisfying in and of itself. Already the action of the choreography, like I said, the fact that we're actually getting blood, we're actually getting bones broken, we're seeing characters in pain and not just like beating each other into oblivion with seemingly no consequence. It feels like the reality of this level of the MCU is finally being reestablished, because people forgot like kind of how crucial those Netflix shows were in terms of introducing this more street level, gritty level to the MCU that really helped to ground it, that kind of, went away during the era of COVID. But I'm so happy that we're back to that level. And even though, again, these first 2 episodes kind of really only established like what's been going on in Matt's world, Fisk being mayor of New York and him trying to atone for his past, but also, still showing us that he is the Fisk that we knew previously, and also showing kind of Matt's struggle in the wake of, Bullseye kind of pulling this horrific deed that he did in the opening scene, and him kind of really struggling with, what he refers to as his darker half, and we see that come out at the end of episode 2, once he discovers that there may be this some more corruption going on within the NYPD that he wasn't previously aware of, that also brings him into conflict with this other vigilante that he discovers has emerged on the street in the wake of his absence as well, this White Tiger character that we meet in episode 2, So that's another street level vigilante that we get to meet. Obviously, Spider-Man is referenced. So we're finally getting back into other aspects, other worlds, other parts of the MCU without necessarily having to make direct references to the greater MCU, which again is what made the original incarnation of Daredevil so good. And I'm so happy that these showrunners, they recognized that what they were doing was not working originally, and they retrofitted it to emulate and continue off of the original Netflix run, which I could not be happier about.
And it's important for the MCU to have this balance of world-ending consequences and just street-level stuff. So, because they can both be compelling. It's a balance of having both of these situations. So, just to watch and just getting these street-level characters back into the MCU, because they're so good portrayals, like John Bernthal Punisher. Like that's a perfect casting, perfect portrayal, and to get him involved into the greater MCU now with this show is really important. I feel.
Yes.
What the hell is Daredevil gonna do against Doctor Doom? I don't
Yeah,
know.
that's always the big question, right? It's like, how is Daredevil gonna is he gonna throw a stick at Doctor Doom, like God, not just Doctor Doom, but God Emperor Doom, the incarnation of Doom that we're gonna get in Doomsday that will eventually lead into Secret Wars. But yeah, that's the part that we don't necessarily have to think about.
Yeah.
Again, there's a reason
We,
why
we, we should
Feige
rather
chose
be
to.
trying to do the Spider-Man Daredevil team up that many
Yes.
of us have been clamoring for
Yes.
ever since they got the Daredevil rights back. They're like, hey,
Yes, which again was
we really
originally
want this. Make this.
Yeah, which again was originally what Spider-Man 4 was going to be, and now it's looking like that's not going to happen, unfortunately. You know, now that Spider-Man 4 is being directed by the Shang-Chi guy, and I think it's going to be a bigger, more multiversal level threat. There's Venom, the new whoever the MCU puts its Venom is going to be in that movie, and yeah, it's just not yeah, I'm not exactly necessarily excited for Spider-Man 4, especially after how
Let's just
good No
enjoy
Way
the
Home
street
was.
level Daredevil.
Yeah, let's
at
just
least.
enjoy the good thing while we can. Like I said, the MCU is entitled to one good thing per year now, and I'm hoping that Daredevil is not the only good thing. I'm hoping the Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four will be good as well. But for right now, I'm just enjoying the street level that we have. Again, the reason why this show is so important to me particularly is because this was during the era. It's a very particular era for me when I was in high school, when you could actually get excited for things that were coming out. And for the most part, they would actually live up to your expectation. It was kind of before the internet kind of had this massive hype wave that almost always was guaranteed to ruin something. And basically what you would have is I actually was, it was during my early days of my internet researching as far as what shows were out back when, during the early days of streaming, when I had just started watching House of Cards with my family, and I was just getting into Game of Thrones and Breaking Bad, and being like, oh, like this is what television is capable of, like kind of the early days of the peak prestige TV era. And I saw that Netflix was doing an adaptation of Daredevil, and I was like, wait, the Ben Affleck movie? I'm like, they're bringing that back. But then I saw Drew Goddard's name attached to it, and I knew who he was because of Cabin in the Woods. And I saw that they were the two big names, Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio. Back when kind of modern day comic day audience weren't necessarily aware of who they were, but me knowing what Vincent D'Onofrio was capable of after having seen Full Metal Jacket and after having seen Charlie Cox in his tiny part on Boardwalk Empire early on, because I was a big fan of that show in high school, and I'm like, oh my god, that's perfect casting for the roles of Daredevil and Kingpin. Like that just works. And then seeing the first episode when that dropped, that opening monologue of him in confession with the preacher, and immediately I'm like, yes, that's the character. That's Daredevil. He's constantly divided because he grew up Catholic, so he's got that Catholic guilt constantly kind of motivating him, and why he emboldens himself as this devil-esque character, because it literally is his dual personality. The fact of lawyer by day, the devil by night, this blind street vigilante by night.
And we got a whole wave of those in the 2010s, like through the Arrowverse, especially, just like vigilante by night, or
but
superhero.
Daredevil was the first one to really, I would say, apply like a more cinematic edge to it. People grafted onto it because of the tone, because of the look, because of the style. Again, that one shot hallway fight sequence that became iconic and became like the template for so many TV action sequences going forward. It truly was revolutionary when it first dropped. There had never been anything like it. And what's it called? Literally, I remember my friends being like, yeah, that's the show that caused Netflix's stock to soar through the roof, was once they saw what a hit the show was. Because that's the thing. This show predates Stranger Things. This show predates, oh my God, this show predates You. This show predates the Mike Flanagan shows. This show predates all of kind of what we now regard as like the modern wave of Netflix shows. This show is years before Netflix buys Cobra Kai from YouTube. Like this show predates all of them. So this show was a seminal, foundational, crucial part of not just Netflix, not just the early wave of superhero television, but of of TV and where we have TV now. Daredevil is just as much of a component of that as it is all of those other kind of subsets that I just listed off. So that's kind of why it was so particularly important and impactful. And then we got into that theme song, and Oh man, to say that theme song is iconic does not even, I think, begin to describe it. Where you have like the creeping piano tune that builds into the operatic score with those visuals. The new version of the theme song that they have for this show, and how they're kind of doing, for lack of a better word, the Disney spin on a previous iconic theme. It's all right. It's not great. It's not the original theme. It's not what I would prefer. But again, it's more so just the fact that I'm so happy that we're back in this.
You got to
specific
remix
episode.
it a little bit for
Yeah.
the newer iteration.
But like Luke, I'm telling you, you would have had to have been there watching that theme song for the first time and first like hearing that haunting tune, and like that theme song would be like part of why I would look forward to the show coming back each year. So yeah, it was just this show. That incarnation of the show holds a very, very special place in my heart, and the fact that they got it so right, and the fact that so many people are so happy to have it back, it's special. I'm like, it's once again an indicator between this and Mickey 17. They're like, okay, there might just be some hope on the horizon for media. You know, we may finally be past the doom and gloom phase of the first 5 years of this decade. So obviously, again, time will tell. We still have 7 more episodes of this show to get through, and then another 9 episodes next year. But for now, I think it's safe to say that we're in good hands. With they made the right choice as well with the creative direction that they decided to go with this show. So, with all that being said, any final thoughts on the first 2 episodes of Daredevil: Born Again before we wrap and get out of here?
No, I'm just glad to have a Marvel show that I can look forward to, opposed to I'm not watching this one. I watched the first episode. It was slow as hell. I don't like it. I'm not gonna watch any more of it. And this one is just complete contrast to that. So
Yes.
if it can carry us over to Thunderbolts, which I know we have a lot of hope for, they're doing this A24 gimmick.
Yeah, I saw that.
I'm not sold on it. I'm
not sold,
okay.
but I give them props for it.
Yeah.
I give them props for it. I think that's kind of funny. I'm like, wow, you know that they are desperate to get people in the theaters when they literally are trying to have to use a style ripped from an indie film studio that is eating their lunch when it comes to box office and just overall cultural significance. I just thought that was really funny. Because again, they're doing that thing where, again, Daredevil, I believe, is wrapping like a week before Thunderbolts premieres. So, or like the week of or something like that. So Daredevil will end that Wednesday, and then Thunderbolts will be out the next day, that Thursday or Friday. So we'll see. We shall see. As far as how it builds up to Thunderbolts, I'm still looking forward to Thunderbolts. Like that, like the trailers. It is one of those instances where the trailers have actually been like surprisingly good. I trust Jake Schreier, the work that he did on Beef. It looks good. It gets better with each and every trailer. So I am kind of looking forward to also, again, how Marvel's kind of taking the Suicide Squad approach to it, where again, it's just a band of misfits up against the world. Again, they already made that work with Guardians of the Galaxy. So let's see if they can do it again with this one. So
did you want to touch on the leaked concept art?
Yes, let's. Yeah. So actually, thank you for reminding me. Yes, Avengers Doomsday. We got some leaked concept art, some images. We saw Doctor Doom standing with Strange over a chained Reed Richards. We have Hulk, She-Hulk, and Scar in what looks to be a village of Hulks. We have Star-Lord hanging out with White Vision, and also another image of White Vision sitting at a table with the Young Avengers and Wong. So what are we thinking about this year?
Well, I looked at it, I'm like, whoa, this looks
it
amazing.
Looks cool.
And then I remember that Robert Downey Jr. is Doom, and they're doing some nostalgia play, and like, oh.
Yes.
But maybe they can make it work.
Maybe
the Russo brothers are just burning money over at Netflix.
Yep.
Like, with the Electric State now.
The Russos are like, we need to go back to Marvel. We wasted enough of Netflix's money. Like, oh my, how much money did they waste for Electric State? It's like 180 million, something like that.
Whatever they say it is, probably
it's
like
probably
the
more.
Next and the Gray Man wasn't cheap either.
It's like every time they're like, how do you guys waste this much money on these movies? I don't understand. And everybody hates them too. And they're not even that bad. I'm sorry. The Gray Man was not that bad. It wasn't.
But it was not like however
it
much
wasn't
it cost.
Great. Yeah, but yeah, it definitely wasn't worth that much money for sure. I'm like, okay, yeah, if they actually spent that much money on this, I'm like, okay, yeah, that's a little excessive. But an Electric State with like the look of those movies, I'm like, good Lord. Like, and they are trying to have Millie Bobby Brown and Chris Pratt promote the shit out of that movie. And it is not working overall. I'm excited to see it just to see if it's going to be as bad as people are saying it is. Because I tend to not buy into those campaigns anymore, so that's just funny. But yeah, the leaked concept art for Doomsday, it looks pretty good.
So you're saying that is already the established battle world, or is it just like just a general separate
right? So
universe?
That's the thing. I think that we might be seeing a little bit of a misnomer. I don't necessarily know if that's concept art for Doomsday. I think that's for Secret Wars, is what that is. And I think that they're just letting, because we know that they're shooting them both at the same time, back to back. They have to. That's the only way that they're going to hit them, because I think they're starting filming Doomsday soon, and then they're going to go right into Secret Wars, kind of like they did with Infinity War and Endgame. And they released the runtime for both those movies as well. They're kind of doing the same thing, the same approach with Infinity War and Endgame, where Doomsday is going to be 2.5 hours. Secret Wars is going to be 3 hours. So they're kind of doing that approach as well. So, like I said, it looks visually interesting. Like I said, we'll see what it looks like once it gets to the big screen, and we'll see if that is Doomsday or if that is Secret Wars ultimately. You know?
I mean, design wise, like it's perfect. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure they'll do the fan service type stuff of him ripping out Thanos' spine in that one panel that I'm aware of.
100%. Yes. Because
So
you still have not read that sect of Secret
no,
Wars,
I
right?
will. I'll buy it.
Yeah.
When
I can
have
say
some-
right now, as somebody who has read that section of Secret Wars, that they definitely nailed the look. They definitely nailed the look. You know, obviously a couple more characters that I'm assuming they'll swap in and out. We still have to see what Thor's part is going to be, because Thor kind of plays a little bit of an integral part in that as well. But yeah, we'll see ultimately.
that,
But right now,
image of Doom sitting on the chair
on
with
the chair.
Sue next to him and
Yep.
Franklin Richards, I'm guessing, and
Sue and
Strange
Franklin
next
and
to him,
Strange
and Yelena is there apparently.
pulled right from the
yeah.
comic panel. Pulled right from the comic panel is all that I'm going to say. So
I don't doubt the Russos in comic book
yes.
movies. I'll doubt them in everything else, but
And everything
not
else, but when it
comic
comes to
book
Marvel
movies.
comic book movies, they always seem to nail it. Yeah, it really sucks, because man, I had such high hopes going for them after Endgame, and man, it is
And
not
you
gone
as a
in their
community
direction.
fan, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Even more so.
but again, it's telling. They work best when they are not in creative control. They work best as workmanship directors. When they have creative control of something, it's not the best. It's not the best, again, because at the end of the day, the reason why they were able to do so well with Community is because they were ultimately executing on Dan Harmon's vision. They were able to translate Dan Harmon's vision. It's the same thing with what they were able to do with the 4 Marvel movies that they directed. They are ultimately enacting on Kevin Feige's vision. They are workmanship directors. Ultimately, they are not auteurs, as they have proven to be. So we'll see in a year once Doomsday comes out. We got a couple more Marvel things we got to sit through this year before that does come out. But ultimately, potentially a step in the right direction for the MCU. We will see. Only time will tell. But Luke, thanks for joining me once again. Like I said, back to back. If you guys didn't check out the Talkin' Lost episode we did right before this, go and check that out as well. We will be back next week for more Talkin' Lost episodes. Like I said, it's going to be a week-by-week basis as far as whether we continue to review new movies each and every week. We got a couple of movies dropping next week, but I think next week we're mostly going to stick with, we're just going to cover that on Lost as well. And then 2 weeks, we have the Severance finale as well as Magazine Dreams.
I'm watching that. I have 1 episode left in season 1.
Nice.
That's the really good one, I hear. So I'm getting more hooked as I go. Like the first few episodes, I'm like, okay, this is good, but when does it get good? So now it's
getting good, and you're starting to see like kind of the mystery box unfold with it. Yes,
the work is important and mysterious, as they say.
Yes, indeed it is. So with that being said, Luke, like I said, where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
They can follow me at Luke Reviews on YouTube. It's all quiet on the Western Front there, but I'm hoping to change that in the meantime. And we discussed a certain Mission Impossible related project.
Yes, a certain Mission Impossible project, should you choose to accept, that will be coming down the pipeline as well.
I think there's one guy at the IMF who just doesn't accept, and they like can't do anything about it.
Yeah, that's always the thing that I always wondered. It's like, does the IMF actually? They always give their agents a choice, but it's like, but there really isn't any choice involved, right? It's not every agent is going to be Tom Cruise and is going to accept the mission every single time, because they actually value their skin ultimately. So we shall see. Maybe, what if that's how Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning ended, with like Tom Cruise finally being like, I do not choose this mission. Ultimately, imagine if that's how it ended. I mean, they won't do that, but that would still be funny if they did. You guys can follow me with everything going on at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms, at Official Talkin' TV Podcast across all platforms. Be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Spotify. This episode will be available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts tomorrow. And as always, people, 12 seasons in a short film, and watch more fucking movies. We'll see you guys next week.